And we're singing. We're whistling or doing all kinds of stuff. Yeah, we're live. It's 5:09-ish in the PM. Close that out a little bit. Need to get my AC up here. It's starting to get warm now. Don't have to have my jacket on and stuff. It's all good. Did some running today. Feel better. It's all good. Today I want to talk about turbo stuff. And we want to talk about in honor of the stuff that Jimmy's been going to back there and the stuff I've done on Hondas and other things, that I want to talk about, like high RPM turbo stuff, because it could apply to LS stuff too. Certainly 4.8 stuff, but also 5.3 stuff. You know, the bigger the motor is, guys building strokers and stuff, because we've talked about that before, you add a bunch of torque and you get a bunch more boost response. And that's the reason why when I'm talking about on the LS side or on the small block Ford side, small block Chevy, big blocks don't really have to worry about response too much unless you're talking about, you know, really big turbos and really big power. But, you know, Dodges, Hemis and all that stuff. When we're talking about, you know, making power, pretty easy for these bigger V8s to have a pretty good power curve, especially stroker versions of these, like a 400-inch motor, you know, 450, 500-inch motor, whatever. They always have, you know, a lot better boost response because they're making more naturally aspirated average power, especially down low. That's why we advocate when I'm talking on the LS side and on other, you know, 5-liter Fords and stuff on these other applications. That's why, particularly for street applications, why I advocate for smaller camshafts for turbo applications. In fact, I just turned a story into the guys at Summit about that, about what does it take to make 1,000 horsepower with a camshaft. And really, it just takes the 1,000 horsepower turbo. The camshaft is just there to do other things. It's just kind of along for the ride. And I think that still a lot of people don't see that. But what we also want to talk about, like I said, because when I ran the lots of turbo testing on B series Hondas, other small displacement motors, where we would run, you know, a lot of RPM. And this is particularly the case. I mean, some of these motors, like those Hondas, K series, B series and stuff, when you're running, I mean, the RPM is a byproduct of, that's the way that engine was designed. I mean, a B series runs to 8,000 RPM or 8,500. And same thing with the K series. They make power out there, and they make power out there even from the factory, which is good, because that's, you know, that's how they get them to be fairly high specific outputs. You know, they're I mean, even the lowly B16 in the 90s was 100 horsepower per liter, so it was pretty stout. And then you had, you know, better versions of that, and then the K series and then the F series and all of that. And so they got fairly high specific outputs, but they did it at high RPM. And luckily, in the case of the Honda with the VTEC stuff, they could also keep reasonable torque relative to its displacement, because you could do a milder cam. That's the great thing about having two cam profiles, is you can have the camshaft, you can have the low butt truck down here, and you can have the truck plus up here, and then you're just better off that way. Obviously, the camshaft doesn't do everything, which is why eventually they added variable cam to get even more dynamic range. And then, you know, you would argue that, well, head porting has something to do with that, head flow, and then intake runner length certainly has something to do with that. So you could have multiple runner lengths that would kind of play in there as well. But when we're talking about turbo stuff, Jimmy was over with the guys over there, and they were testing, you know, 2 JZs and RBs and things like that, and rotaries, obviously another good example. And a lot of those motors and the B series that I have up there, when you start out, you just put a turbo on it. I wrote books on the Focus stuff, and any of these smaller displacement motors, you put a turbo on it. And if you combine that right size turbo, like with the Omni that I have, any of those kinds of things, if you combine it and have a realistic RPM range, like let's say 6,000 or 6,500, you combine it with a long runner intake manifold, you know, reasonable cam timing, and then size your turbo for the displacement and the desired power output, you can have a really responsive deal. Like the Omni has got a small factory turbo on it, and it's very responsive. You can do other things to help that along, but that's an important thing. So if you want power like that, you choose a turbo kind of accordingly. But what happens on these applications when you have a small displacement motor, a B16, a B18, B20, in this case of that photo that I have up for the thumbnail, when you have that, an RB, a 2J, whatever, but you want to make a lot of power. So now here's what happens is that you're going to, in order to facilitate that, instead of running our 300 or 400 horsepower turbo on our B series or K series or whatever, you're now going to go up into 6, 7, 8, whatever, even 4-digit power levels for a lot of these things. And you can make that, obviously, if you put the right size turbo on it. The nice thing now, as opposed to when that photo happened, that we have much better turbos now. The designs of the turbos are much better, and you can actually make a pretty good amount of power, particularly on a small displacement motor like this, with I would argue, with a much smaller turbo now. And so that was like a 76 millimeter that we borrowed from a Hovitz. I only borrowed it because it was available. He had it. It was one of the twins that he used, and he had taken those off and he had upgraded to bigger turbos by then on his 4.6 liter on his drag car. And so he's making a bajillion horsepower with that. So I said, well, if we can make half a bajillion with one of those and put it on there. We didn't care about boost response. We just were looking for a big number, and we got 728 or whatever before we decided that's enough. That was at 2 bar, and it worked out well. But it was also, as you would expect, a turbo of that size to be. And by the way, a turbo that was in no way, shape, or form designed for what we were doing. It was designed for his application. Although, you could argue half of a 4.6 is a 2.3. We were at a 2 liter. Yeah, we were at least close, right? But with less than optimized turbo choice and no regard at all for turbo response, we just put it on there to kind of see what happened. We ran it and it worked out well for what we were trying to do. Back then it was a reasonably good power number, but it was still at fairly high RPM. I mean, it gained in the last 2,500 RPM, it gained like 300 horsepower. So it's definitely, had we started the run, which we never did, had we started the run like at, let's say, 2,000 RPM or 2,500 RPM, we would have saw the typical kind of a small displacement, big turbo thing where we're like, whoa, and then it really kind of ramps up. And we saw that on I've seen that on RB motors, seen that on 2Js. And this is particularly the case when we're looking for big power. When we put a turbo on there that a 2.6 liter or 2.4 or 2.5, 2.0, whatever, or a 3 liter in the case of the 2J, when it's not going to be able to spool it until later on because we're trying to make 4 digits, it doesn't really get going until high RPM. And so then they also do the other things that would make it a high RPM motor because, hey, I'm going there anyways. That's where the turbo is going to be. That's where it's going to make power. So let's get it to do that. Let's complement all of that stuff with cam timing that works there, with an intake runner length that works there, a lot of times with head porting that would help it work there and make more power. And so let's do all of that stuff. And then you get a combination that's, then really kind of gets with the program as the RPM goes out. My question for you guys is, do you, when we're doing a dyno day, everybody likes that. Everybody wants to see the big number. They're like, oh yeah, that thing made 1,000 horsepower, 11 or 12 or 2,500 or whatever the new number is now. The people like to see that, and there's always going to be at least one guy in any kind of these situations when you have dyno days or you have clubs get together, groups or whatever, that they're going to have something like that. And it's going to be, if the guy's trying to make serious power, it's going to be at RPM. If you're starting with something small and you put 1,000 plus horsepower turbo on it, it's going to happen, at the top of the RPM range. The question is that usable? Is that desirable? Now, right off the bat, I would say yes, because that's a lot of power. So that just like all by itself, like the effort that went into doing that, because these things have forged rods and forged pistons and cams and on the import stuff, fancy adjustable cam gears, or if they're electronically adjustable, that's even cooler. They have VVT or VTEC or that kind of stuff. And so, and usually the turbos are fairly visible, like the kit that Jimmy did for the twins on the RB. That's kind of awesome. So they look the part, and then at RPM, they're obviously making the power, and at RPM they also sound the part. So that right away, again, that's just nothing but cool. But where do you employ that? Like, where do you, you know, probably for street driving, that's, unless you're just driving around and going to Cars and Coffee and you could pop the hood and show everybody how cool the thing is. Again, thumbs up, I'm for that. You're not going to want to be driving around and have somebody just work you over in something that makes like immediate torque and takes off because you have stepped on the throttle at 2,500 RPM and nothing's happening, because nothing's going to happen for another 3,000 or 4,000 RPM. You know, it's not going to be good for that. But it can be good for like track racing, and you know, we see that even with like we typically talk about LS stuff, but we see that with the LS stuff too. Not everybody wants a low buck truck camshaft and Trailblazer SS intake panel, stock heads, and then 1,000 horsepower turbo. That's not for everybody. It's for a lot of people, and you can go a long way with that. But there are lots of guys running at the drag strip that have, you know, 8,000 RPM LS motors that are making a lot of power, that are making power out there. So they've got like with the 2J or the RB, they have turbos that are sized for that kind of thing that they're making. They come up later because they're bigger. They have a cam that pushes it out there. They have ported heads. They have a high ram or a BTR Trinity, or, you know, some kind of shorter runner intake manifold that pushes power out there. They have a converter that pushes power out there. They get gears that push power out there. They've got you know, some form of anti-lag, two-step or a quick spool valve or that kind of thing, so that they get all of that stuff working, and it's working in that RPM range. And the same thing for these imports, if they're drag racing that and they're doing 2Js or RBs or RX-7s or something. It's been a while since I've seen an RX-7 or a rotary one run at the track. I like those because I have fond memories of racing on the road courses with those when I first started racing in showroom stock with my Mustang. And since mine was supposed to be all stock, it had cats and everything on it, and it was relatively speaking, it was just like whisper quiet compared to everything else that I was on the track with. Because when we raced and I was running showroom stock, I was running SSGT. There were lots of other cars running in all kinds of classes, IT classes and stuff, and in addition to the other showroom stock classes. So there's a bunch of people, a bunch of different kinds of cars in different classes racing on the track at the same time. So you had a big disparity in cornering speeds and driver ability and all of these things. But I remember fondly racing against the rotary powered, I think they're RX-3s, I think. There were a couple of them, and there were 510s out there. There's all kinds of cool stuff out there, which was awesome. But so the question for you guys is, let me know. Do you like that? Do you like that for, you know, I guess we'd have to caveat this and say, do you like that for your personal car? Do you like that for your, you know, we have to ask the right question. Would you like that for your daily driver? Do you like to be there when people are running those and think, oh, dude, that's really, really cool. I like seeing that. That's got a giant turbo on it. You know, we want to hear that thing all wicked up. We want to see the exhaust glowing, and you know, we want to feel the power, because that's what we do, man. That's the cool part about this. So would you guys like that? Would you like to go through all of the things? Do you have drag race cars where you're already doing that? And then my other question for you guys is, if you have any questions, please let me know. We did the compressor supercharging discussion last night with Dale and Carl and Mark, and Jeff Smith was there too, and that was very cool. So that was interesting. So if you guys have any questions about that, I'll see if I can answer those. We've talked a lot about this subject, and so I talked to them off camera and have before and stuff. So those guys are great guys, and that's a really cool technology. The thing that I keep going back to that I love more than anything is that it's negative 80 degrees. We like cold charge temperatures. We like cold charge. What duration gives the most torque on an LY6? That's not the correct question, because that's not what does it. You gotta expand. You gotta tell me what else. What are you doing? What else is in the motor? What are you doing with the motor? What are the gears? What's the converter? What are you trying to do with it? Is it a daily driver? What are you trying to do with it? And what do you mean by most torque? Do you mean the most peak? Do you, the most average? Because if you get the most peak, it may not be the most peak. Is not going to give you the torque where you want it. The highest peak torque number is going to be a high RPM cam. It's going to have the most torque, but it's going to have it later on in the RPM range. Is that what you want? Most people don't. So you got to kind of tell me. And oh, by the way, I have videos up where we've run a bunch of different cams on LY6s, and you can look and see. More than likely, if it's a daily driver, I'm going to tell you get a low buck truck cab, Chef. I'm not late. Nope, you're not late. 6,500 RPM for a 302. F-Series swap seems a good price performance swap in my area at the moment. What are you talking about the Coyote motors that are in those? I want streetable torque for 70% of the RPM range, not 1,000 RPM at 8,500. Okay, yeah. So you would choose your doctor. You would choose your turbo accordingly. So that's the thing that you would want to have, like we were talking about. What RPM range do you want? Okay, let's look at the other things before we look at the turbo. Let's make your motor do those things and be effective in that RPM range. Then let's add boost to it. And then once we have it working in that RPM range, let's choose what boost we add to it so that it enhances, in that RPM range. And that's not hard to do. Watch one of your Engine Masters episodes yesterday. Are those still out on the air, on the airwaves? Thanks for the tip on the ring gap for my 5.3. Yeah, that's a good idea. And then you can almost go into it and not worry about it. Then you got to worry about other things like tune and stuff. I never thought about those little engines put out 100 horsepower per liter NA from the factory. It's actually impressive. It takes a lot to do that on a 6 liter. Yeah, it's it takes a really lot of money to make a 6 liter make 600 horsepower. But they did it, and we ran them in endurance racing for 24 hours. So not only did they do that, they would do that essentially forever. And then to get them to, that was a stock one, because they were rated at, the B16 was rated at 160. But if you did the stuff that we did to them, we had them, the one that I ran that was a U.S. touring car legal one, which didn't allow camshafts or sprockets or any. I mean, it was basically supposed to be kind of stock with an air intake and a header on it. Mine made that at the tire. So, because you do like little stuff to it, lots of little stuff. Have you heard of the game called Beaming? Some of the engine physics are pretty realistic. I haven't heard of it. No. 6673 turbo, decent for a pump gas 5.3. Yeah. What is it? What power level are you trying to get to? And then how responsive do you want the turbo to be? Turbo with nitrous is a trick. You can use nitrous to spool it up with a big turbo. How big of a spool time difference on a 6 liter with a twin turbo setup will I see with an 8.3 housing versus a 101? Because I'm utilizing only half the exhaust in each turbo. Will it make a more noticeable difference? There will be some difference. On a 6 liter, what turbos are you using? Because the turbo size that you're using, the total size, has going to have more of an effect or more or less of an effect based on that AR size. Because that AR with two GT20s is going to be different than two GT40s or two GT50s. So you got to tell me more information to see what the difference is. My guess is you should put the 83s on it if they're reasonably sized turbos, because I don't know why you'd need 101s as twins. I found a 70,000 mile LQ4 for 800. Is that a good deal? Yeah. Is it complete? 510s were very popular. Datsun 1600 in Australia. That's what it was. Okay. Yeah, I like those. They're very, very, very cool. Compressor supercharging was amazing. Thanks, Bill. It was good. Carl and Dale, those guys are great guys. I hadn't ever met Mark before, but he seems really cool. Speaking of 8,000, I found out the stock ECU doesn't do over 8,000. Spark control falls apart. looked at spark output on oscilloscope with a signal generator. Cool. Overbuilt. I love old RX-7s. In the DD in the hills around here. I never wanted a drag car. I guess GT and sports cars are my thing. Yeah. I'm much more of a road racer. Having lots of RPM is cool, but torque always won. Seriously, when are most people above 7,000? And it's going to be the exhaust that Jimmy built, I think was a 4-inch for the RB motor. And so it's really, really loud. So if you're at 8,000 or 8,500 RPM or whatever on an exhaust like that, making that kind of power, everybody's going to hear it. Feedback like a 300 inline 6 is a torquey engine, but it mostly just doesn't make power. Yeah, it's funny that the things that just continually get said about stuff. Oh yeah, those are better for torque. But they're better than what? An inline 6 is better than a V8 for torque? I don't know how you make that distinction. Which one are you talking about? Which specific one are you talking about? That's always my thing. Is there any downside to trying solid lifters on my 274 cams or anything else I need to change? Well, why do you want to go to a solid? I don't. Do you have an RPM limitation or something? 6673 is an S366. You're much better off with a GTX 35 or a G42 for the power. Bill with the assist there. I like that's why I wanted to ask him what he was trying to do to figure out, because it might be that he wants something smaller than that. But did the late 460 still have flat tappet cams? I don't think that they put hydraulic rollers in any of the 460s. What do you think about a single 3584 and a 5.7 Hemi? You have to just tell me your power level that you want. And if you tell me it's 700, then I will tell you you probably should. Well, if it's the 700 the tire, you definitely are going to go to bigger turbo. Richard, love your show. The information I get from it, just sent my 6-liter off to the machinist. It has scarring on one wall. He said he may have to go 65 over. That's a lot. So you're going to turn your 6-liter into a 6.2. I've seen guys do it, but it's not recommended by any of the machine shops I work with. And you definitely want to have it sonic checked to make sure that it has enough wall thickness for that. A few things unrelated. Can we get more tests on 4200? Also the Nissan VK, Mercedes. Also maybe the Toyota 1UZ and the 1GZ. Probably more 4200s. The rest of them, probably not. Do you think a J35, J30 swap is worth it? Into what? What are you swapping it into, race pack? Is it possible to have too small of a turbo? Yes, it is. You can have a turbo that's too small for your intended power level. Just ask anybody that's tried to turn the boost up on any of their factory turbos, because you can turn it up to where you just don't have any turbo left. Where I find your books. Here's the book on the modular Ford stuff. This is what it looks like. It's SA Designs. They have it on Amazon and that kind of stuff. This is what it looks like. Building 4654 Ford Power on the dyno. Like, longest title ever. That wasn't me. I didn't choose that. In fact, I lobbied so that they wouldn't use that. SA Designs, SA, the letter S, the letter A, Designs, and you can get it online. Whatever it will do, 5.3 pump gas, 94 octane, Trailblazer SS, truck Norris cam, just a street truck. I was hoping to have good spool. Yeah, you would be better off with a 3584 on that. I don't know how much are you trying to make though. You gotta. I mean, are you going to run 7 pounds, or are you going to try to run 20 pounds? Or what are you trying to do? A 94 octane, you're not going to run that much boost. putting a Gen 4 L86 in my 66 Corvette. Nice. Aluminum motor. Wanting 450 to 500 with a Tremec. Depending on how fast. What cam do you suggest? Randy, you can take a look at what we did to the L33 stuff up there. 450 is very easy. That's just a cam. 500 takes way more stuff. So I don't know how much you're planning on doing. The fast is a good choice. And then with the right kind of cam, you can get more than 450, 460, 470, something like that. You're going to have ported heads to get to 500, I think. But and we are a BTR dealer, but you could get a BTR hot rod cam for that, which works pretty well. There are others too. Plenty happen with the RPM and boost in my category. I work in road racing. If you're not mid to high RPM, probably downshift. Yeah, you use, and when you're racing, you use everything that you have. I'm looking at an 04 CTSV, 177K. It's making 660 as it sits. That's something I could reliably get healthy power out of until 250,000. Yes, as long as the tune is right. You're going to build a motorcycle engine for use in a small car. What engine would you use? Turbo or supercharger? Is there any limitation in what you're doing is it for a class or anything? Is like for Bonneville, is there any limitation? The one thing I can say about a motorcycle engine in a car is the drivetrain, like getting the power to the wheels usually is the problem for that. Because you have to have some kind of chain drive or something. And then the torque that a motorcycle engine typically makes, like even a 1 liter bike engine, like make the motor as big as you can so it has torque. But even a 1 liter bike engine, it doesn't have torque like like a 2. Well, even a 1 liter. I wonder what the torque curve looks like at 2000 on a 1 liter bike engine compared to like the Sprint motor. But that's usually the problem is the torque and the clutch is an issue, and then getting the power to the wheels on a bike engine. 3S GTE is a great example of too small of a turbo from the factory if you want more power. All of them are. I mean, all of the factory turbos are sized for not maximum power. They're sized for their particular turbo application, for the power level that they want, which was an easy thing for them to do, for reliability and longevity and blah, 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 all of that stuff. Here's on the size of the downpipe for the 42. The specs on the turbo on your website say 4-inch, but then the power cone is 3. It's 3.5. It's not 4-inch. GTX 3584 is perfect for a stock 5.3. Ever use a Speedmaster H-beam rod? I don't recall doing that. I take that back. I think we have used a 6-inch rod, one of their 6-inch rods in a small block Chevy. And if you're doing it in a small block Chevy, they will be stronger than a stock rod, definitely. As long as all the machining is right on them and the hardware is right on them. I'm looking at 62, 62, 67, 62. I want to make 600 wheel horsepower. I want to be reasonably responsible for the street. Is this for twins? Because you're way bigger than you need to be for twins for 600 wheel horsepower. EF Wagon 89. I want to be unique. T-swaps are all over the place, but I don't know if it's worth the work. The hood cut and the bulge. It's cool, and I've seen them before. In fact, there's a really cool guy that ran it at the which I'm surprised that they let this in at one of the Lemons races. He had a Honda S600, I think, that he had a 1 liter bike engine in, and yeah, bang, 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 bang. I mean, it sounded like a race car. It was awesome, and he had wings and stuff all over it, and it was painted at the Martini racing livery for a Porsche, but it was on this S600, and it was amazing. I don't know how much work it took him to do it, though. It probably was a lot because it was nicely turned out. 14B on the 4G63 and the 4B11's factory turbo on the Hyundai Genesis are also tiny for the factory. Well, they're not small. Like I said, they're sized for what they're sized for. There's a particular reason that they did that. You should see the turbo that's on the Sprint. I mean, it's tiny. In fact, I could probably bring one. I'll bring one to maybe up one of these nights. It is very, very tiny, but it's sized for the boost response and the power output that they want out of that factory motor. They don't size it to go, hey, look, we have a 100 horsepower turbo motor, and oh yeah, we made the turbo big enough to go to 500. I mean, that's what we would all want, but that's just not reality. Do you have any motorcycle engine stuff on your channel, or do you plan to? I haven't. I've mentioned the Trail 90 that I have, stuff that I've done, some of the things that I've done with that, but otherwise no motorcycle engine testing though. I was about the motorcycle engine for a small car because I'm considering building a homemade kit car similar to the Ariel Atom since I'm a TIG welder. Okay. Yeah, again, like I said, as long as you can get if you're going to shaft drive an axle for that, like a go-kart, that might work. Looking to swap my OBS Ford truck with either Coyote or 4-valve with no limit. Would you rather build truck would be used to tow regularly? If you have the ability to control all of the things that you can with a Coyote, I would pick a Coyote. I think I would pick a positive displacement supercharged Coyote if it's something you're going to tow with and it's going in a truck. No class, just for fun. Thanks for information. How much power would a stock 5.3 S366 make? You're doing the wrong thing there. If you're causing issues with an SRT 392 intake with boost, do the SRV become an issue at 25 pounds? I have never tried to run a 392 intake manifold. If you're talking about I know that's a 6.1. If you're talking about the composite ones, I haven't run one of those. We've only run the other ones with boost, the earlier 5.7 stuff. I want my LQ9 to have a turbo that whistles as loud as an 18-wheeler when going through the gears. Just want to say thanks for giving away all the great information. They have those whistlers that you can make them make those noises, but I can't think that that's good for it, though. How big of a cam for a 351 Cleveland 4V head, single plane, 1-inch 7/8 headers? My inspiration is NASCAR sounds. So what? You just got to tell me. You got to give me a power thing because that, you know, Cleveland's can take big cams because you got a lot of port there, but you got a lot of head flow. I think the one that we ran had like a 240, a mid 240s at 50 cam. I've done motorcycle engines in a car. I suggest using an Elite Race MX200 differential since it has a reverse built in and it's a stout unit. Cool. I've run both turbos on a stock 5.3. They both work, but the S366 is a little laggy. The S369 that we tested definitely was laggier than the 3584. Needs to have more octane or E85, but it's awesome response. Have you done any testing on a GMC 5-liter or 8.2-liter inline 6-cylinders? I haven't run any of those. Like the 305, and then what's the other one? The other one's bigger than that, right? 311L 4L80. Haven't touched it yet. 6-liter LQ4. I'm putting forged pistons, rods, Truck Norris. Putting in a K5 Blazer. That'll be good. They do have the Lemons races to get around the rules for specific engines. Frankenside Motorworks swapped a radial engine on MR2 for Lemons. No, I'm all for it. I thought that what Lemons was like it was supposed to be low. I think it was not low dollar. So since you're talking about torque for a bike engine on a small car, Kawasaki H2, yeah, that would be a good one. Factory supercharged. I kind of want to go with a Honda CBR. Would a G42 1200 be better than a 3584 on a 5.7 small block Chevy with 93 octane at the 700 horsepower mark? to keep back pressure down and therefore donation. Running a 3200 stall and a GT45 currently. Well, both of those, either one of those would be more responsive than your GT45. So even a 42 would be better than what you currently have. And at 700 horsepower, the 42 would make more power at any given boost level compared. It's just not going to be as responsive. I don't know what the rest of your 5.7 is. High boost engines cost too much. I have a 23 BRZ. I can't imagine an LS in it. Much rather have a K series turbo making 500 at the top because of the weight. James 502. Okay. Do you have a GT30 versus GT35 turbo video out yet? No, because I only have one. Well, I have two GT30s, but they're older versions. And I think that they're max speeding ones. I have 3076s, I think. We're going to do some of that kind of turbo testing when I go back and see Jimmy. Thanks for responsive and pulling my hair out with all this. And I don't have much hair left. That's always interesting. Very interesting to me. Oh, got a ZX14 still in the frame. Cost me a sprained ankle and a shoulder. Uh-oh. That's good. It's bigger, so it's 1.4 liters. So that's good. That it'll it's a big block. It'll be torquey. And then with boost, it's going to be even better, right? Oh, we don't have a pole here. Got to get that pole going. Okay, we're going to throw you a little curveball here. Is a 4.6 liter Ford 2-valve Mustang still a good performance car? Well, let's see that Ford. Let's see that Ford, love you. Ever built an LS for sled pulling? I have not. I don't know that I've ever even seen an LS powered sled. I've watched sled pulling before a few times. I don't ever remember seeing one that was LS powered though. Looking at camming my 6-liter LQ4 for street drivability. Any tips? I have a 3000 stall. What is the rest of it, Matt? And what kind of power are you trying to make? Looking to improve power in the mid-range and gain another 500 RPM power bound. This is the reason I'm thinking of trying solid lifters on my existing cam. Why do you think that solids are going to do that? I'm curious. Are you going to zero lash a solid, or are you going to give up the? Are you going to give up the? Are you going to give up that cam timing from the lash? Because I don't think that that's going to help you. It might help way down low if you, but I don't think that cam's too big for your application. It'd be interesting to see a supplemental cold air system on a turbo setup to lower inlet air temperatures and make 200 to 300 more than the turbo setup. Well, I think you're thinking about it the wrong way. I mean, I would love to have lower charge errors, but if you are able to feed the turbo system with a cold air supercharging system, it's just going to also add more airflow. I mean, the colder air would be a byproduct, but what would happen is the boost would go up and it would make as much power as the amount of extra air that you wanted to add. But I think what would happen is that you'd either have to do one of two things. You'd either have to shut the turbos off and just have the compressor supercharging do all of the work, or you'd have to feed the turbos from the compressor supercharging, which would mean the compressor supercharging would have to exceed what the turbos were doing by whatever amount of power you're talking about gaining. So if the turbo was making, let's say that they were making 1,000 horsepower, let's say they were making 2,000 horsepower, then you'd have to set the compressed air supercharging system up to feed the turbos, let's say 2,500 horsepower worth of air. And then that's what you get. You would get colder air you would get some change in charge temperature, obviously, from the colder air, but you'd also just get more airflow and you'd get more boost and more power. Do you think a 3800 Big Bang will debut this year? I don't know. I really wanted to go over 550 horsepower. It's going in a 2500 Yukon. Matt. 550 horsepower would be a lot. Is it going to be a big cam on an LQ4, especially if you're trying to do it with a truck manifold and a set of 317 heads? Honestly, I don't think you're going to get there. I think you should be looking more at 500 with that setup. And even with a pretty good sized cam, I think 500 is doable, but that's going to be a pretty big cam. But if you have a 3000 stall, you're probably okay. I got your low buck truck cam for an LS swap Land Cruiser today. I was wondering how you keep the cost so low. Sorry to go off topic. Yeah, we did that one. Not really wanting to go over. Okay, we did that one. Not even a Ford guy, but a single overhead cam with a great motor. I'd like to see a big bang with a 2-valve Ford. I would too. I'd like to do a 4.6 2-valve one. Even more so that no, not a torque storm. We'll never do it. Yeah, or a Hellcat blower on it. But I would like. I've already run a torque storm on. Did we run them on? I think we ran it on a modular motor. But we've run super centrifugal blowers on 4.6 2-valves a lot. And then a Hellcat blower you could put on there if you wanted, but neither one of those would be a big bang. I watched a video the other day where you were testing water method injection and air-to-water intercooling. You were having problems with distribution in a stock manifold with water methanol injection. Yeah, it can't go in and distribute in a long runner manifold. It can't get evenly because it's fuel. I mean, it's a fuel. It's liquid. 2-valve Mustang has the affordability and good sound on the Venn diagram. It is, yeah. It's like a PI Mustang. I still look back at it as, I mean, I'm a bigger fan of the 5-liter stuff than I am of the modular Ford stuff, except for the Terminator. I really like that one. The 4-valve Cobra doesn't really do it for me. The 4.6 2-valve, the PI one, a lot better than the non-PI one. It was a big enough step up where that was a worthwhile thing. And I did so much testing with those, like for this book and for all the Muscle Mustangs and Fast Forward stuff that we did. I did a lot of testing with those. And so I kind of like those. I was harping on it for a long time until TrickFlow came out with the heads that, hey, somebody needs to make cylinder heads. Brian eventually did. But they needed that because there was a lot of them back then. How do you think water methanol injection would work in a blow-through application compared to air to water? I don't know what you mean, but like a carbureted application? The carburetor already has charge cooling from the fuel. If you're blowing through a carburetor, it already has that. But I still would rather run an intercooler than anything, because the intercooler cools all the air evenly, and all of that gets to all of the cold air gets evenly to all of the runners, as much as whatever happens to the air can get there evenly anyways, based on whatever the intake manifold is doing. but it's much better. All the air gets there much more evenly with a intercooler than it does with water methanol injection, and also more than it does with introducing fuel into whatever manifold that is. Is there any way to run compressor supercharging on the street? Yeah, you can, as long as you're only using it for a short acceleration, not all the time. Just like you can't run, like if you had a nitrous bottle in the back, you could run it until the nitrous bottle is empty, and then you can't do it anymore. It's the same kind of thing. It's just that it would, you'd have to be filling the bottle up. It's not really designed for that. Looking for 500 to 600 horsepower on a turbo stock bottom end 5.7 Hemi. Yeah, that turbo would do that. Can we get some 6.2 Boss content? I don't know that. I've never ever even seen one of those. Is a 4.64 two-valve Mustang still a good performance car? 65%. That's actually more than I thought it was going to be, which is good. Be great advertisement for compressor supercharging to install on a Mustang with an L33. It would be a better deal if they ran one, if we were able to run one on the dyno and do a big bang on it. I think that video would get way more views than putting it on a L33. And I wouldn't want to put it in a car to do that. I don't think that would be good. I don't think that would be a good return for them. They already have real race cars running it, so that's a way better thing. But a big bang thing I think would do well for them. You need some kind of priority valve to close when the compressor supercharging opens up. For what, Dan? The Ford Raptor engine? No, I know what it is. I just I've never seen one. I remember reading the ProCharge Mustang magazines. I'm sure they're out there, but an 85 Ranger with a ProCharge 4.6 sounds good. Yeah, I don't remember running a ProCharger on one. I ran Vortex on a lot of stuff, on the modular stuff, both on the 2-valve and the 4-valve, and on the 5.4. We ran a Vortex and a Paxton on the 5.4, the Sean Highland motor that we did, and then we ran turbos on it also. And I did intercooler testing, and that's actually way back then is when I did the first nitrous intercooler test. We're like, okay, we're gonna run nitrous as the intercooler, more because we were getting into valve float, and I wanted to make a number. I wanted to make more than 900 horsepower from the thing that we were trying to do with the supercharger, and valve float was getting in the way. So I'm like, well, we just got to turn the boost up. And then we had no way to do that. I'm like, well, we're just going to add nitrous to it. It's non-intercooled, so we'll see. This will work as an intercooler. It didn't really work that well as an intercooler. It worked really good to add power, because when you add 50 or 100 horsepower from the nitrous, it's 50 or 100 horsepower. So it'll build boost when needed, but open to the atmosphere when boost isn't needed. Well, the compressor supercharging already has that. It already has the open valve that closes when it's under boost. So it already does that, and it would do that to the turbo. That's what I was saying. I don't know if you were here, but that's what I was saying, that you would have to have the compressor supercharging once that front valve is closed, once the atmospheric valve is closed that was feeding the turbo. The compressor supercharging would have to feed everything that the turbos were doing, let's say 2,000 horsepower, and then more of that. So, and which they can do. So if you had it do 2,500, then you would make 2,500. I was surprised at the timing the guys are running. Yeah, they're running NA timing. Just a random question. I got a 91 Fox body with a stock bottom end with twisted wedge 11R heads. Those are good. 53C combustion chamber, System X. What's the question? Oh, roughly what power should it make? It's a 302 then? I'm thinking that should, like, if we ran it on the engine dyno, I'm thinking that could be getting up near 400 horsepower. If the S366 on a cam stock 5.3 can make 450 wheel horsepower, I'll be happy enough with that. That turbo it can easily do that. That will be very, very easy. You can make that without a cam. You could just do that with a stock cam if you put that turbo on there. Rollins valve guys bad for a street car. How long should they last? I on an LS, I like powdered metal guides. That's why I had them installed in those trick flow heads that I have. Was there anything better about the 3-valve than 2-valve? Yes, it makes a lot more power. It added as much power over the 2-valve as the PI did over the non-PI. In fact, more than that, because it went from 260 to 300. So it was a pretty big. Any thoughts on the Turbo Smart Electronics wastegate? Worth it for a street car for more response and control? No, I don't. I think people have the wrong idea on what wastegates actually do. I don't think you need to have that sort of control. I think if you have a boost controller, an electronic boost controller, and it's working properly, I think you're fine for the street. Yeah, that 400 horsepower, that's about what, if you have a good, a good set of heads, which those are really good heads. You have a good intake manifold. That System X is a good intake manifold. You got a good camshaft in it that will fit in there. And so that should be up, getting up near there. Certainly somewhere between 375 and 400, probably. %, saying yes. Pertinent was again further up in the rev range versus the 2-valve. I don't think so. I think what they did was they did it with more head flow and a better intake manifold, and then also variable cam timing. So they're able to gain. I think they gained everywhere. I don't think the 3-valve revved necessarily higher than a 2-valve did. It may have revved a little bit more. I could see where we made peak power if I looked it up, but it wasn't like, it wasn't a high RPM motor. Do you think that the 4200 engine will become as popular as other people on YouTube believe it might be, like the LS is now? It won't ever be what the LS is. Nothing will be what the LS is. I don't think. I don't right now don't see another motor that could become that popular. First of all, they don't have as many of those as they have. I don't think they don't have as many of those as they have LSs. And right now there's nobody making aftermarket heads. There's not 20, 30, or 50 aftermarket heads. There's not umpteen different camshafts. There's a few guys making things, and they are cool, but it won't ever be what the LS is. Compressor supercharging offers boost with happier harmonics than others. Okay. LS and K series are by far the most popular engines. There aren't any aftermarket K series heads, right? I don't think that the K series market is anywhere near what the LS market is. I think the K series is popular, but I don't think that it's even close to what the LS is. Are those videos posted? I don't remember directly comparing, but yeah, there are 3-valve videos up. I don't remember comparing it directly to a 2-valve. I would just look at the data that I have. I have endless amounts of data. I can tell you where a 463 valve made, or a stock one made peak power. Three-valve, 4.6 liter. Yeah, it made peak power at 5,800. Peak torque came at 4,300. Although I have to say, we didn't have variable cam timing in this, so it might be different than that. Stock head flows well. Yeah, no, I know. You're preaching to the choir, man. You're I wrote a book on K series, so I know what they do. They're really good. I like them a lot, probably more than most people. But I'm still just talking. I'm just talking about the reality of the market size. B series is closer in popularity to the LS. Yeah, I don't know anymore now. I would be curious to see what the market size was for B series and K series to see what's going on there. Um, Again, I don't think either one of those is anywhere near what the LS is. Aftermarket K series says just a stock and ported. Yeah, that's what we did. We would just port B series heads and you'd port stock K series heads. Wish they'd made a good induction system for a small block Chevy. It would have been a great turbo motor. Yeah, the small block Chevy. The problem the thing that I don't like about it for boost is that I don't like the symmetrical ports. I mean, that doesn't stop you from making lots of power. I mean, they ran small block Chevys at Indy, but still, if you if you want to nitpick about stuff, you can complain about things like that. Want to upgrade my turbo T-Bird? Okay, what turbo you recommend? I think when we were doing the SVO stuff and the turbo T-Birds back in the day, I think we were putting like 57 millimeter turbos on those. Yeah, the Maribera. And I'm a fan of the 4200. I think I'm gonna send mine back to Calvin, and maybe do some stuff with them. But I'm a fan of them. But it's just like somebody asking me if something else is equivalent to it. A small block Chevy isn't equivalent of the LS. At least I know that people are going to get mad. I don't think it is. I don't think its market share is what the LS is. Run 200 pounds of boost and you can make 3,000 horsepower in what? What are you talking about? For the 2.3 whole set, the big valves on the 2.3 Lima always gave me heck on road courses. Yeah, I'm trying to think when I was doing the testing with Tiny Avenger back then, I know that one of the turbos he ran was a 57 millimeter, but again, it would depend on what kind of power you're wanting to do for it. L92, LS3 head, stage 2 cam, roller rockers, Johnson lifters, looking to put an LSA on it. Can the factory rods and pistons live on the street to 750 horsepower? I'll be going with, yeah, if you got the rings, you're fine. Yeah, you're good. Oh, the 2.3 liter can make 3,000 horsepower with 200 pounds of boost. Okay. Yes, not really a very good cylinder head. It was fun doing the testing on those with Dave. We were blow the intercooler off the top of it. It's pretty exciting. I remember standing up above the chassis dyno, spraying air on the air-to-air intercooler, spraying misting with water, and doing all kinds of cheater stuff. It was fun. I think back then, I don't even think we were running a standalone ECU back then. Can we all agree to kill off the stage moniker? I think that helps people. They understand it in level of bigness. The look on the small guy's face when they were doing inspection today, and asked if he could spot the hidden turbo. Did you ever test a ported Navigator 4.6 intake compared to an FR500? That wouldn't even be close. The Navigator intake is, if you use the upper and lower portion of it, is way longer. And porting it is not going to change the runner length. So it's maybe you would improve the flow rate, but you're still going to have really long runner length. And so it's going to want to make power at a lower engine speed. I have videos up on that. The FR500 would be a way better, higher PM manifold. And a Navigator 4.6, a Navigator is a 5.4, right? Are you talking about the Aviator one? The Ellis is a solid bare bones engine that makes big power. 2.3 liter in the SVO is my favorite engine. I did test an Aviator, but never a ported one. Never a ported version. We're going to close out our pull at 59%. 462 valve hanging in there, man. That GT. Got my GT Mustang. Got my Mustang GT. Back in the day, we didn't have stages. We had a stock cam, 3/4 race, full race. Well, there was no half race. No, there were RV cams. So the after stock came an RV cam, then 3/4 race, and then full race. Full race must have been like all the roller cams. I wish I would have put an RV cam or something in my Camaro back in the day when we were rebuilding it. The 4.6 Terminator is one of the best sounding engines. I agree with that. I like those, especially with exhaust on them. They sounded very cool. The blower sounded good. It sounded good even on the engine dyno. We put headers on it and ran some, I think we ran Bassani mufflers back then on it, but it was cool. And it's even better with a Kenny Bell on it. It was a lot better. And then even better with turbos on it. 4.63 valve is the best sounding engine. Okay. Everybody likes their thing, man. A 3.5 liter 5 valve flat plane crank Ferrari V8 sounds pretty good. You want the 5-force cam? Yeah, that's what Brian called that big nasty cam, the 5-force race cam or whatever. In the Wayback Machine, there was a Summit magazine with a cam at the bottom of the page for the most power. Yeah, that bottom of the page for the comp cam stuff was always the biggest one because they went in order. We got 1 minute. 1 minute warning. I don't even have you can see this. I don't even have a regular copy of this magazine or this book. You can see that this is one that it was a pre-production or pre-printed deal that they sent me, so that it just has all these things and like all the pieces are kind of removable from them. So I don't even have. I should look see if anybody has one of these, like a bound copy, so that I have that, for my collection, so I could show people, show my kids. See, I wrote stuff. Yeah, that's not important. That's not impressive whatsoever. My Bitcoin's doing well. Nice. Your Bitcoin must be doing really well if you ordered a 632. Richard, if you didn't like Fox Bodies with Flowmasters on them, what exhaust did you like? I like the Boral exhaust that I had on there. And I actually like the Super Trap exhaust that I had on there. But the Super Trap exhaust, I finally got to hear it from the outside when I was at the Silver State because they filmed it. And so you could kind of hear it. When we took all of the stacks out of it, it was way better. The Boral exhaust I liked a lot, but I wasn't a fan of Flowmasters. Not my thing. Lots of guys ran them, though, man. They sold the heck out of those. We ran a bunch of tests on them. That's what I wonder. I wish I knew how many sets of those that they sold. That would be interesting. And I also like to know, I want to know how many GT40 manifolds that Ford sold and how many B303 cams that they sold. I had a Fox body with Flowmasters. Yeah, it's all subjective. You like it or you don't like it. That's not for me. People can like all the things that they want. That's great. I worked for Flowmaster in 2005. Okay. I'm trying to think. I think we put a set of Flowmasters when I did an exhaust test one time because we ran I ran a 5-liter on the engine dyno, and we put like an H pipe on it, and then ran a full exhaust on it. We put stock stuff on there, and then I thought that the exhaust that we put after the H pipe, so we had to extend the thing from headers or whatever we had, because the H pipe didn't fit where the dyno was, because it was all kind of in the way. But we put a factory style exhaust on it, and then changed the factory exhaust to an aftermarket one. It probably was Flowmasters. Maybe 20 sets for 2 guys, made 200 a day each group. Fiber has some good exhaust Engine Master episodes. Yeah. Is it a good idea to run cast iron Victor Jr. heads? Well, I've never heard of a cast iron Victor Jr. head. 1.7 rockers and an HO stock cam from 93 with a roller block carburetor and Holley street dominator intake and a Holley on a 302. First of all, I never heard. Are you talking about as cast Victor Jr. heads? I've never heard of an iron Victor Jr. head. But otherwise, all that stuff is fine. The cam is pretty mild, even with rockers on it, but it should drive around nice. Cherry bombs, that goes way back. Yeah, when you were walking out of super shops, they had the tin like trash cans there. I didn't think that they were aluminum. I thought that they were tin. I thought they were steel. And then they had all the cherry bombs sitting in there, and they were cheap too. I think that they even had them in like Kragen and Chief and all of these auto parts stores. Purple Hornies. I've never heard those. Start pulling the inline 6-cylinder head today, and we know to where to get an aluminum head. That head's not aluminum on there? Cherry bombs on a truck with a 460. My brother had them on his Firebird. He had cherry bombs on it. Oh, no, he didn't have. I take that back. He may have had those to begin with, but he put Thrush Hush mufflers on it. The round ones, not the turbo mufflers, the round ones. They were kind of loud, because I think he had headers on his. Purple Hornies were made by Cyclone in the 70s and 80s. They were header mufflers, very loud. Okay, yeah, I haven't heard of this. You think you have an aperture style, like an iris thing that you're talking about? Yeah, we talked about that for a long time. I don't know if that would make any difference. It makes a difference if you can get everything out of the way of the airflow, like a barrel valve, or if you can get the iris to expand all the way out. You could do that, and it would improve the flow as long as there's nothing there and there's nothing impeding the airflow. Only aluminum, I think, is the alternator and manifold. Okay. Do you have your Silver State Mustang Coupe? Yes. Yeah, I'm an original owner of that car. I bought it new. I need to go get it. In fact, I need to go get a couple of cars. Six-cylinder split exhaust with cherry bombs. Outside the club, cherry bomb. And on that note, it's been more than a minute. And then, that's how it goes. I will see you guys all tomorrow.